12 days of TMC event. And kicking off this afternoon's content, we have the 7 deadly social media sins for mortgage lenders. And it's going to be led by a tag team from our longtime preferred partner, MQMR. For those not familiar, stands for Mortgage Quality Management and Research. Our partners specializing in compliance-related functions, including internal audit, QC work, vendor management, and much more to it. And privileged to introduce our 2 discussion leaders from MQMR. First up, we have Michael Barone, Executive Director of Compliance, who will be kicking off today's discussion, as well as Dayna Silver, Director of Strategic Initiatives at MQMR, who will be coming in later into the discussion. So first, I'm going to kick things off by turning it over to Michael Barone here, and we'll have some supporting slides that you'll see up on the screen momentarily. Mike, floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. Hope you're doing well and staying safe in these times and staying healthy. Just want to touch base and let's start, just from basics. And I like to start talking about social media with why all the fuss. Why all the fuss about social media? And I'll tell you in simple terms. Most lenders, organizations have a pretty good process of reviewing advertising, making sure it's monitored, looked at, and approved before advertising gets disseminated. Social media doesn't have that same context. It doesn't have that same way that people are afraid to post. And lenders are very concerned of what's being posted on social media. Social media is a time where someone could go back to home after a few drinks on a Friday night and post something, right? And you're not there to approve it. There's no one there to send it in to compliance and approve it. And many people don't even realize that that's something that is an advertisement, something they have to be careful with, right? So there's not a realization of the danger between social media posts and true advertisements that are disseminated. And that scares the heck out of lenders and the like. These social media posts, they're communicating on behalf of the lender. The lender, if it's something stated with respect to lending, the lender is always going to be on a hook. So you have to be very careful. If you can flip the slide, the FFIEC issued some social media guidance in December of 2013. It's a while back, but it is still really what's out there. It's not a regulation, but it's a guideline, and it's what regulators look at. And it gave you an idea of what lenders need to do and what they need to identify, measure, monitor, and control the risks associated with social media. And it lasted, 6 items, not necessarily in any order of import, but they want senior management involvement. All right, they want a governance structure with clear roles defined. All right, so that's one of the items they stated. They want written policies and procedures, which demonstrate a culture of compliance, demonstrate what you can do, what you can't do, how to get posts approved, what they can post on, what they can't post on. Right, so they want some type of written policy and procedure for your employees. They want a training program, right? What good is a policy and procedure without training? Need to be able to train them, including new hires. They want oversight by a qualified individual. Many times it's a compliance officer. It doesn't have to be. They want monitoring and auditing. Dayna will speak a little bit to that. And there's a bunch of softwares out there that allow you to monitor and audit posts on social media. And then they want the full circle completed. They want to go back and report to senior management about what those findings are. When you monitored, when you audited, what did you find? How are you going to make sure that doesn't happen again? That's truly the full circle reporting back your findings to senior management. Can you flip the page, please? Generally speaking, as I just mentioned, advertising is what scares most lenders and the like in our industry because that's what you're doing on social media. In many instances, you are advertising. The medium for an advertisement is not relevant, right? It just matters if you're promoting a commercial message. So you can do that on Facebook, you can do it on Instagram, you can do it on a billboard, you can do it in a newspaper or radio, right? The medium doesn't matter. It's just that you're promoting a commercial message. And what are some of the traps that people fall into on social media? And many of these are just standard advertising rules, advertising mistakes. But again, social media in most instances is advertising. So you have the same rules, the same guidelines, the same traps that you want to be aware of. simple things, listing your NMLS number, right? You would always do it on an advertisement. Why wouldn't you do it on a social media message that is promoting a consumer message? It's required. Certainly need to indicate the lender you're working for, right? Individual MLOs don't have the ability to lend and don't have the ability to broker, right? You need to be with a lender, sponsored by a lender, sponsored by a licensed brokerage, right? So indicate who you are working for and indicate the true name, not unapproved names, right? And you have to have a name that's approved by the banking department, either the name of the licensed entity or it could be a DBA, right? If you've had that approved by the banking department. But only use approved names. You're not using names that are not approved. Again, you are advertising. Misleading statements. Tell the truth. Don't be deceptive, right? Government affiliations. Make sure you don't have government affiliations posted in the site, right? You don't want anything in there with government affiliations. Those have gone sideways on many lenders. State licensing information. It's required in many states. If you are licensed in one of those states, when you disseminate it on social media, it's going everywhere. It's not just going to a particular state. So if you're licensed in certain states, there's a good chance you may need some state licensing information. Sometimes it's just the license number or the type of license you have. Other states require additional information, so be aware. You're not going to use expert counselor, things of that nature. You're a mortgage loan originator or a licensed mortgage loan originator. That's what you are. You're not an expert counselor. And stay away from superlatives such as the best, the lowest, the fastest, right? All those types of words, very hard to be proved. And I'll give you one more. Stay away from abbreviations. People in the general public outside of the industry might not know what DTI is, may not know what LTV is, may not know what FICO is, right? They might not know any of those terms. So stay away from abbreviations and things that people outside of the industry may not be totally aware of. So what can you do? You certainly can advertise if you follow all the advertising rules, right? So just make sure you are following your advertising rules, just like you would want any other publication or any other advertisement in any medium, right? So if you're following the advertising rules, you can do that. But let's say you don't want to do that. I don't want to post advertisements. I don't want to worry about posting my consumer information. I don't want to worry about, my license information. I don't want to worry about all the things I have to do if it's an advertisement. What else can I do? Many lenders, many LOs share articles, right? Share articles about the industry. They might share pictures, right, of recent events. If you held a first-time homebuyer seminar or something. They could offer contests. I just warn you, be careful. There are state rules out there with regard to contests and lotteries. You can congratulate borrowers, right? Be careful of privacy rules. You don't want to use last names, but you certainly can congratulate borrowers on an achievement with their permission. Personal achievements, right? I just closed my 500th loan. I just became licensed in blank state, right? Personal achievements. Tell your story, right? Tell your story. Tell about your pre-qual program, right? Tell your story as an LO, how you got into the business, how long you've been into it, how many loans you've done, what you specialize in, what loans you like more than others. Tell your story, right? So there are distinctions between advertisements and non-advertisements on social media. And if you don't want to follow the advertising rules, just be careful what you post. There are things you can post, but you can't post a commercial message. You can't post, come to me for a mortgage. If you need a mortgage, come to me. Buying a home, come to me. All things of that nature. You can post, but you got to make sure you follow the advertising rules, which we just went through. Here's a good checklist in terms of some monitoring items. I'm going to let Dayna talk about some of this. And again, there are plenty of social media platforms, softwares that go through and will check all of these types of things with regard to word usage and so on and so forth. Privacy, again, certainly want to monitor for privacy, making sure that on the social media pages, no privacy rules are being breached, and certainly the expectation of privacy is there with individuals, and make sure nothing there is being posted, which a consumer or someone who originated a loan with you might think would be private. You want to look for terms of reputational risk. What's out there, what's being said, right? These are being read by others, and you as a lender or a broker are being held in conjunction with that. They're underneath your name, with your name, and your reputational risk there is enormous if the LO loan officer is posting something, could be something political, who knows, could be something discriminatory. you have reputational risk there, so you have to be careful and you want to make sure you monitor it, right? Someone's political views can cause a lot of harm to a company, right? We've seen it outside of our industry, certainly could happen inside the industry. Your equal housing logo, right? Standard NMLS number, I mentioned that earlier. Trigger terms, to the extent you're dealing with trigger terms under TILA, make sure that you have all of the required information. APR, all right, if you're listing the interest rate, you also have to list the APR, and it has to be close in proximity to the interest rate. So not throwing in little disclosures, which is a good segue into the next item, which are disclosures, right? Be very careful in having your disclosures 1/10 the size of your advertisement or whatever you are posting, right? There's something out there called UDAP, and it certainly could be seen as being deceptive to a consumer when you have all the nice language in 12-point font and they have to go get a magnifying glass to read the disclosures, right? It's not a good look. So be very careful. Disclosures should be clear and conspicuous. They shouldn't be hidden and in a way that is not easily read by a consumer, i.e. on the back of an advertisement. So be careful with the disclosures. It's definitely a hot button in the industry right now with examiners. Joint advertising, certainly want to make sure that everyone is paying their pro rata share to the extent there are joint advertisements with realtors and so forth. State-specific requirements, spoke on that. You want to make sure that any state you're licensing, you have those requirements. And you also want to look at it from a deception, misrepresentation point of view, all right? You have to look at it from a consumer's view. TILA requires you to look at it as the least sophisticated consumer, also known as the village idiot, or you pick your word. You're not doing an advertisement, you're not doing a social media post to make sure it's not deceptive to someone in the industry. The problem is someone outside of the industry doesn't understand the industry. It might not know certain terms, right? You talk about paying points, you talk about DTI. People outside of the industry may not know them, and it might move your advertisement or your social media post into an area where it's deceptive or misleading to a consumer because they read something else that no rational person in the industry might read, but certainly a rational purpose outside of the industry without knowledge of the industry, might look at. So be very careful when you're looking at these and you're deciding what to post, what not to post, that you look at it from the eyes of the outsider, not from your own eyes. We in the industry know a lot more than the people who are placing advertisements for, and therefore it's much more of a chance or much more of a likelihood that they can get tripped up or deceived by certain words. So just be careful with that. Going on to the next one, just really a recap here. This is my last slide, and just talking about some deadly social media sins that we've come up with over at MQMR. First one is failure to maintain a risk management program at all. And we see it a lot. We do a lot of audits, and you see where you certainly don't have a program, right? Or you have a program is Googling your loan officers one time a year, right? Probably not a very good program, right? Not one you'd be comfortable with and confident with showing to an examiner. So be careful, all right? Have something going. You went through those items at the beginning, what the FFIEC went into. You want policies and procedures, you want training, you want senior management involvement, and you certainly want a way to monitor and audit social media, right? You don't know what's out there unless you're looking, right? You don't know what's out there. You don't know who's posting things at night, who has their own web page, who is posting things about the company or your company, and maybe not do it compliantly, right? So you need a way to do that. You need a way to look for it, monitor, audit it. It's important moving forward, especially in the world where we are, where this is such a big part of everyday life, social media. And remember, one of my favorite sayings is it's all good till it's not, right? Just because you've been going through for 3 years, 5 years, you've had no social media monitoring platform, you haven't done anything to monitor social media, you just feel like your LOs and your staff know what to do and know how to do it. Be careful. It's sometimes you get a false sense of security, right? It's all good till it's not. Everything's good until you get the letter in the mail from an examiner, the knock on a door from an examiner, whatever it may be, right? It's all good until it's not. So just because you haven't had an issue, all right, don't think that knock or letter may not come by. It may not, it may. But just because you haven't had a problem, it's not really an indication that there's not problems out there or a potential for problem. Failure to maintain a crisis communication plan. What if an employee posts something that's really inappropriate? What if Channel 7 or Eyewitness News or ABC News shows up at your door one day with a posting that one of your LOs made last night? Remember, we talked about it before, maybe after they had a couple of vodkas, or maybe not, just a really bad post. And the media shows up, right? What are you going to do? Probably a good idea to think about that before they knock on a door, right? Before the media's got the cameras rolling, probably a good idea to think about what you're going to do in that scenario. It's happened a lot. You see it outside of the industry all the time, right? There's no reason it can't happen in our industry. Some of the bigger ones that have garnered the media's attention have not been in our industry, but there are employees that post something, they come right to the employer, right? They don't go to that employee's house. They come right to the employer. Know what your employee posted, right? Have something set up on how you're going to handle that now. Who is going to communicate? Who's going to meet to decide the communication? Are you going to get a third party involved? Have that third party crisis management firm picked out, selected beforehand, all right? You'll be happy you did that. Failure to monitor human resources activity for compliance. There's a lot of state regulators, state restrictions, which have come about lately. And you're not necessarily allowed to mandate people to friend you on social media, or that if you send them a friend request, they have to accept it. It's not allowed in certain states, right? You have to know which states you can do what, which states have restrictions, which states do not. And that usually starts with human resources, all right? They're the ones that are checking, that are doing, usually early on, trying to get information from the potential employee or from the employee. Be very careful on what you're allowed and not allowed to take, all right? There are rules, there are restrictions, and there are limits. Failure to maintain a fraud plan, all right? What happens if you have a fraudster posing as an employee online, all right? That's just an example, but you certainly want to be aware that there are situations where fraud plays into it, not just on a loan application where someone tries to tell you they're going to live in a home and it's pretty obvious that they're not, but there are a lot of other areas where fraud can play in, right? We all know about wire fraud and the havoc that can cause. There's all types of fraud. Again, I mentioned the other one, someone posing as your employee, all right? Very, very prevalent in the industry. Be aware of it and have a plan. Lack of IT security. Again, social media, same IT security that you need and everything else, right? It should be covered by your incident response protocols, right? And you should certainly have IT security surrounding your social media platforms, whether it's company platforms, whether it's individual platforms. That has to be a part of the equation when it comes to IT security. Failure to monitor for complaints. I don't know that this is really required, but I think it is a sin. You know, if you're not knowing what people are saying about you online, could be a very dangerous spot, whether it's Yelp, whether it's Facebook. The one thing I would say here is you really need to make sure that responses are from an organizational level, right? You have way too many times I see responses coming from a branch, coming from an LO, responses to complaints. It shouldn't be. It might be all right. It might work out. But overall, it's a terrible practice. Responses to complaints should be on an organizational basis. You should have a complaint policy, and they should be trained on it and know that social media complaints is no different than someone rendering a complaint to the CFPB, right? They have to be treated on an organizational basis. They should be headed up to compliance and possibly to senior management, depending upon what it is, but they should not be handled on a more micro basis at all. And it's very important because people don't look at that when it's Yelp or Facebook and they just allow people to just, go on and reply. You're gonna be careful. Last thing is with regard to targeted marketing. Just digital marketing has a lot to do, a lot of info on consumers. A lot is being done right now with this digital marketing, and you have to be careful. You have to be careful from a fair lending point of view. You have to be careful from a UDAP point of view. If you are targeting, there's plenty of targeted marketing going on social media sites. There's plenty of targeted marketing on Facebook, on Instagram, plenty of it going on. Whether you even know it, that your lead generators are doing it, it's going on, right? And there are underlying issues there. Fair lending, UDAP, there are certainly issues there that you should be concerned with. I think you've seen Twitter and Google investigations over time. I think there's some things that have popped out with regard to investigations in our mortgage industry against some brokers and lenders, unlucky ones at that. But it really could go into this area. Be very careful on these targeted marketing and social media. It's a dangerous area. It's an area that's garnered some regulatory review, and just be well aware on how you are targeting leads and how your lead providers are targeting leads. I'm going to turn this over to Dayna right now to talk a little bit more about technology, but thank you very much. And we do have some time for questions at the end. If you have any questions in terms of what we just went over, happy to field them and give you a response. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Now I'm going to talk about social media platforms and technology. So to start, here are the top 6 social media sites used in general today. And I'm sure a majority of you listening to this session have accounts with at least 2 of these social media apps. Now, when we take a look at these stats, we have figures in the millions and billions. Now, I recognize loan officers and mortgage-related advertisements are only a fraction of these figures, but those numbers are still really large. Next slide. So how are we monitoring? Many lenders have a manual process to monitor social media, and it may look like this image. You have an analyst sitting at a desk, Googling loan officers' names. Next slide. But in reality, it's a headache. There are too many sites and too many pages to monitor, and it's inevitable something will be missed. And some of you may be able to relate to this image. Here is a screenshot of a lender's social media activity that I took back in April. And you can see here, there was a huge spike in activity right when COVID hit. Now, the obvious reason is LOs were not able to meet with their referral partners and build relationships the traditional way. The only way they can connect and build interest is through social media. Now, today, 8 months later, social media trends are still high since the pandemic hasn't really lifted. Now, one thing, however, that has changed is we're actually seeing more organizations get into social media advertising space. And from a platform perspective, we've actually seen large increases in activity with some of the less popular sites, such as Instagram and Alignable, which is LinkedIn's competing platform. I also, something interesting, I recently heard a lender shared with me recently that their loan officer was active on Snapchat. Who would have thought? Not me, that's for sure. Next slide. So how are we going to monitor all this activity? And to be honest, the only solution is technology. Technology will integrate with these platforms, these social media platforms, and automatically capture your loan officer's social media sites and posts. No more manually Googling loan officers' names. Now, the way it typically works is through trigger terms, and Mike had mentioned this earlier. The technology will scrub these social media sites. They'll scrub the posts and identify violations like 0 down payment in this example. Technology can also scrub images and video content, which I think is pretty cool. In addition to that, being able to scrub posts, the technology will send you email notification for any new activity or any violations that are identified, making it a lot more easier and creating more success for that analyst, for that organization responsible for social media. Technology will also provide summaries of activity via dashboard and produce reporting that you can either deliver to senior management, deliver to an auditor, or a regulator to prove that you have sufficient monitoring and risk controls in place. A lot better of a solution than a manual process. Next slide. Now, technology can also monitor non-compliance issues, such as inappropriate or profound language, most recently a concern, political references, and it can also monitor any misleading or irresponsible marketing posts, such as forbearance terms for COVID hardships. This is very important for brand recognition. And then one last thing that I want to share with you, which is a non-compliance issue, but I view as a bonus, and something you should be concerned about is leads. Technology can monitor websites and identify websites associated with your loan officer. And I often find loan officers forget to update their website addresses under their social media account. And new leads are sent to their prior employer's website and not the new employer. And none of us want that to happen. And that concludes the presentation for today. I want to thank you all for joining this virtual breakout session, and I'm going to hand it back to you, Tom, for any questions.